If you still have toxic friends you need to cut out of your life, you'll want to be very clear with them. Let them know that you are not willing to put yourself at risk by exposing yourself to dangerous triggers. Remind them and make it clear that you are now on a different path. You are now a different person. You are going a different direction in your life. And remember, most people relapse within their first year. So most of your friends probably aren't going to take you seriously until you have some time under your belt. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred sober living option to help AA newcomers stay sober during their first year in the program. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place, because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Let's get clear on one thing. We believe that a relapse or a slip is not a part of recovery. And that's exactly why this podcast is dedicated to you or any loved one you know in their first year of striving to live a clean and sober life. The purpose of this podcast is to come clean with all of the misinformation that's out there about recovery, addiction treatment, mental illness, and the strategies to stay sober in general. So if you believe you're in the right place, or if you know someone who is struggling with addiction, it's my privilege to share this podcast with you. Now, I have no idea if you and I have ever met, but what I do know is that AA saved my life. And I also know that to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, it's not just about stopping your drinking, drugging, gambling, sexual indiscretions, or any other addiction you may have struggled with or suffered from. Because at Camelback Recovery, we believe that sobriety can and should be fun. And look, any recovery process is not easy. It's challenging. It can sometimes be annoying. And for the most of us, it is often difficult to stay on the path. But here's the good news. The self-awareness you gain from listening to this podcast, especially if you are in your first year of your recovery, will help you make better choices, which will ultimately lead you to living a kick-ass sober life. Visit camelbackrecovery.com to learn more about our treatment strategies for alcoholism, drug addiction, or mental illness. And we even offer recovery coaching, so you can enjoy the freedom and happiness you've always searched for. Welcome to the 73rd episode of I Love Being Sober, the show devoted to people in their first year of sobriety. If you are pressed for time, listen at 1.5 times speed and you will still get all of the content from this episode. No need to take notes because I paid a professional note taker to do that for you. The notes to this and other episodes are available when you look for them at ilovebeingsober.com. Please do that when you're done listening to this episode. You'll be glad you did, and that's my personal pledge to you for listening in its entirety. Now, although your first year in sobriety is central to our discussions, you and I will also explore other fascinating and important topics such as health and fitness, self-care, food and nutrition, breathwork, and biohacking, just to name a few. All of these are your gateway to living a kick-ass sober life, which is our mantra at Camelback Recovery. In this episode, episode number 73, you'll learn the second secret, which I believe is critical to avoiding a relapse. You'll discover that getting rid of your toxic friends is crucial if you want to avoid a slip, along with why it's so important. I will share my experience with getting rid of my toxic friends, and based upon that information, you can figure out exactly how it's going to work for you. So lean in and listen carefully, because this episode could have a significant impact on how you can make it to a year and much closer to living a kick-ass sober life. Also, this podcast is like an AA meeting that everyone here is either clean and sober, struggling, thinking about getting clean and sober, or whatever it may be. So if you learn anything or if you hear anything that resonates with you throughout this episode, please let us know in the comments section of YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. What you share might resonate with someone else and possibly save them from a relapse or even save their life. And every review and every comment gets us that much closer to helping one more person or one more family. So don't be shy and be sure to share what resonates with you in the comment section. You must get rid of your toxic friends if you want a shot at making it to a year. You must create distance from them. Your old friends promoted your old way of living. If your old friends are still drinking and drugging and still in the addiction, it's impossible to stay clean and sober if you're hanging out with them. As New York Times bestselling author Ben Hardy says, willpower doesn't work. You might not drink or drug the first time you hang out with them, but eventually, if you keep on hanging out with them, there's going to be a time where you're weak, where you're not as strong, where you're vulnerable, and you're going to slip eventually. Might not be tomorrow, might not be next week or the week after, but eventually you're going to slip. And as they say, if you spend too much time in the barbershop, eventually you're going to get a haircut. It's the same thing. And even your friends that may not necessarily be alcoholics or drug addicts still engage in toxic behavior that's not conducive to your new way of living, to your new life. Like Jim Rome famously said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Whether you like it or not, you are greatly influenced by the people that are closest to you. There are a few signs that I want to point out that indicate a toxic friendship, just so you're aware of them. Number 1, if they're not actively supporting your recovery. For example, they don't support your efforts, your recovery efforts. They don't like it that you're still going to IOP. They don't like it that you're still seeing a therapist. They don't like it that you're going to 12-step meetings, working a 12-step program, hanging out with people that you met in the rooms of AA. Maybe they give you shit when you're going to meetings. Number 2, the relationship is one-sided. They're a taker. They're not a giver. Number 3, they start trying to control your life or your level of sobriety. And I had a woman that I dated early on in my sobriety. She thought that I spent too much time at meetings and too much time with my friends in recovery. And obviously that relationship didn't work because that didn't work for me. I'm a busy person and I don't have a lot of free time, but I know that I have to continue working a program. I have to continue seeing my therapist. I have to continue doing my personal development type activities that help me stay clean and sober. Recovery has to be a priority. And especially if you're in your first year, your whole life, everything in your life, most things should revolve around recovery. That should be the priority. That should be the number 1 thing. Number 4, they deliberately attempt to keep you away from your family or your new friends that are supporting your new way of life. Your old friends are still in the disease. Your toxic friends are still in the disease. And they are used to you being the old way that you used to be. They don't like the new you. They want you to continue being miserable with them. Misery likes company. That type of person is not conducive to your recovery, and they need to be cut off. And hey, if you've got some people in your life that maybe you've known them forever, maybe you've known them for a decade, maybe you've known them since you were a child, you can reconsider after a year, but I would do everything that I possibly could to give yourself the best chance of making it to a year. Number 5, they point out how you've changed since you got clean and sober, and they don't like it, or they don't like the changes in you. Number 6, they continue to point out your faults or take jabs at you. The way I like to think of this as they say, what people think of me is none of my business. So not being attached to what other people think, regardless, if they're pointing out your faults or they're taking jabs at you, it's probably not somebody you want to spend too much time around. Number 7, they continue to drink and drug around you. Today, I've been sober for over 11 years at the time of this recording, and being around people that drink and even people that do recreational drugs, it doesn't trigger me. It doesn't bother me. I don't have the desire to drink or drug today. However, I don't spend a lot of time around those types of people because that's not my lifestyle. That's not what I want in my life. I prefer to spend my time with people that are living the type of life that I want to live. In my first year, I was even more selective in who I spent my time with. Spending time with people that drank and drugged around me was a slippery slope. I guess it could still be a slippery slope today. I just choose not to put myself in that environment. Those are not the types of people that I attract, and they're not attracted to me either. Surround yourself with people that have the life that you want. These are the people that are engaging in healthy activities like yoga, hiking, meditation, any type of exercise, golf, or any other hobby that is not centered around drinking. Personal development groups, workshops, 12-step rooms, etc. Your new hobbies and your new interests will lead to the people that you want in your life. Your new hobbies and your new interests will attract the right people. And the next thing you might be wondering about is, How do you say goodbye to your toxic friends? For me, it was pretty easy. I focused on my new lifestyle. I focused on going to meetings. I focused on doing the things that I like to do, doing yoga, CrossFit, triathlons. I'm super active. So those are the things that I enjoy doing. And because I was focused on doing those things, my toxic friends, they didn't want to spend time with me. They didn't want to do those things. They like to drink and do drugs. My whole life was surrounded by drinking and drugs. All of my activities were drinking and drugs were the main activity. That was the main deal. In my first year, most of my activities revolved around recovery. My toxic friends wanted no part of my new lifestyle, not to mention the fact that most of my friends actually lived in different parts of the country. I got clean and sober in Arizona, and most of my friends lived in other places. So it wasn't hard for me to cut my toxic friends out of my life. And actually, there are a lot of people that go away to rehab, that go get sober somewhere else in a different city, in a different state. Sometimes people go across the country. Probably over 50% of our clients at Camelback Recovery move to Arizona to get clean and sober and start their new life. Moving or going away to rehab is a great way to start over if that's something you're able to do. Even if you just go to rehab for 30 days or 45 days. And if you can stay for a few months longer to do IOP and stay in sober living, you're giving yourself a better chance of making it to a year. The longer you can stay away from your old environment, the longer you can stay away from those triggers, the better your chances are that making it to a year. Remember, over 90% of people relapse within their first year. That 90% is brought down to 50% when people stay in a highly structured or a high quality sober living home for at least 90 days. Google Camelback Recovery, 9 mistakes to avoid when choosing a sober living home to learn more about how to find a good, high quality sober living home in your area. Relocating, at least in the short term, is a great way to cut yourself off from your old life. This is a good solution in the short term, as long as you're focused on living your new way of life and doing everything you can to avoid the slip. If you still have toxic friends you need to cut out of your life, you'll want to be very clear with them. Let them know that you are not willing to put yourself at risk by exposing yourself to dangerous triggers. Remind them and make it clear that you are now on a different path. You are now a different person. You are going a different direction in your life. And remember, most people relapse within their first year. So most of your friends probably aren't going to take you seriously until you have some time under your belt. And let them know that the only way they will be part of your life is if they decide they want to get clean and sober and they want to live a new life as well. And I would say stay away from negotiating with your toxic friends because it's not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to convince them that you're right, and they need to figure things out on their own. Don't feel guilty or remorseful for letting go of your toxic friends. You're charting a new path for your life, and you must do everything in your power to avoid the slip. And remember that they were not contributing to the new you, and you have no further obligation to them. Your new way of life will attract friends and relationships that are much more meaningful and have much more depth. Not to mention, these new friends and relationships will share your values, your excitement for living a kick-ass sober life, and your new sober lifestyle. So here's a quick review about the insights you and I both rediscovered in the 73rd episode of I Love Being Sober. Getting rid of your toxic friends is crucial if you want to avoid a slip. And I went over why it is so important. I shared my experience with getting rid of my toxic friends, and based upon all of the information that I shared with you today in this episode, you'll be able to figure out how it works for you. And remember, these insights will only work for you if you work them. So please make sure you apply what you've learned in this episode of I Love Being Sober, because if you do, you will be on your way to living a kick-ass sober life. And I think you'll agree that that's exciting to think about. And speaking of reviews, before we end this episode, I want you to go to the reviews section on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and type in one thing that resonated with you, your one aha moment. Every comment counts, and what you share could resonate with someone else that is struggling and potentially save their life. You will also be asked to rate this episode. I hope I've earned 5 stars from you. So go ahead and share the one thing that resonated with you in the review section of iTunes or wherever you're listening. It'll take just 3 minutes out of your day, but what you share could not only save your life, but it could also save someone else's life. Okay, that does it for this week. I'm Tim Westbrook, and I hope that our paths cross again next week for I Love Being Sober, the show devoted to people in their first year of sobriety. And do whatever it takes to join me for episode number 74, because we're going to talk about secret number 3, develop a positive support network. I encourage you to invite a friend, loved one, or sponsee to listen to I Love Being Sober. I can't wait to connect with you then. It will be an insightful episode, so I really want you to join us with your loved one.